What if I told you that DC actually had their own cinematic universe, like one that actually worked? It had continuity, consistency, solid production, and an actual ending. And most people kind of slept on it because it wasn't live action and there's only so much marketing that you can get for an animated movie. I'm talking about the DC Animated Universe, or the DCAMU. It's also known as the New 52 by some fans. And let me just say this, the DCEU was trying to copy the MCU when it should have been trying to copy the DCAMU. We usually hear people talk about how Marvel has the better live action universe, or live action movies maybe. Meanwhile, DC has the better animated movies. So for those who don't know, the DCAMU is a series of connected animated movies that started from Flashpoint Paradox in 2013 and wrapped up with Justice League Dark Apocalypse War in 2020. So basically the MCU, but for DC, but animated. And while the DCAMU isn't perfect, and we'll get to that, it's consistent and it told one big story over several years. So let's get into it. Planning. The original plan for Man of Steel wasn't a shared universe like Marvel. Man of Steel was meant to kick off a Superman trilogy before it was reshaped into Batman vs Superman. And the only reason for that is because they wanted some of that Marvel money. But to be fair, the DCAMU also started because of Marvel. But what sets it apart is planning. Like, someone clearly sat down and said, okay, this is how we start. This is where we want to end. Here are the main focus characters, the character arcs, the comics we want to adapt. Boom, let's go. Now compare that to the DCEU. Like, Zack Snyder clearly had some kind of vision, even though I'm not even sure I was a fan of it. But it was so evident that there were production issues, and like, it shouldn't even be that evident. And let me just pitch this in, that Marvel totally outclasses them in terms of planning, and I think it doesn't get enough credit for that, at least peak MCU tone. Now this particular point carries a lot of weight in my opinion, as the DCEU felt very disjointed because of the lack of a consistent tone. Like, how does Blue Beetle exist in the same universe as Batman vs Superman? And the scene with Superman in Shazam just didn't feel right. The DCAMU was mainly PG-13 with several liberties, or just rated R, but it didn't lean heavily on being dark for being dark's sake, except for a few exceptions. My point is that the tone was flexible. You could make a PG-13 movie and an R-rated movie and it still would have felt like the same universe. It was less about the age rating and more about the realistic tone of the world. But the DCEU could not be consistent in its tone for 3 movies in a row, kinda like the Thor movies, with Thor Ragnarok being able to balance the comedy and the darker themes. But if you rack up all 4 Thor movies, you will notice the lack of a consistent tone. Interconnected storytelling. So what do I mean by this? It means characters change and plot lines continue across the movies. Decisions made in one movie echo in the next. In the DCAMU, you can literally watch character arcs develop across multiple films. You can see plot threads get introduced and then pay off later. Damian Wayne is one of the more prominent characters, and he's a perfect example of character arcs in this context. We meet him in Son of Batman. He's a child raised by the League of Assassins to be ruthless and brutal. But over the course of the DCAMU, from Son of Batman to Batman vs Robin, Batman Bad Blood, Teen Titans vs Justice League, the Judas Contract, all the way to Apocalypse War, Damian changes. He learns loyalty, he builds relationships, and when we get to Apocalypse War, he's literally willing to sacrifice himself for his dad. That is a character arc that spans throughout movies. Now compare that to the DCEU. What's the arc for Superman? Between Man of Steel, Batman vs Superman, and Justice League. Both Justice Leagues. In Batman vs Superman, he was stoic, he dies, and when he comes back, he's smiling. There was no growth, no development, he just started smiling. And what about Batman? He's basically the same in Batman vs Superman and in Justice League. And let's talk about plot threads. Spoiler alert. In the Flashpoint Paradox, Reverse Flash gets shot in the head by Thomas Wayne, and he's presumed dead. Years later, in Suicide Squad Hell to Pay, guess who's back? Reverse Flash. Still alive, but barely. And that gunshot from Flashpoint is still visible. But you see what I'm talking about? It rewards you for watching the earlier movie and it gives weight to that continuity. And that's what in-universe storytelling should look like. Now look at the DCEU. Remember when Flash shows up in Bruce Wayne's dream in Batman vs Superman? That moment looks like it's teasing an important time travel subplot or some big multiversal warning. What happens with it? Nothing. No explanation, not even a throwaway line. Like even in Zack Snyder's Justice League, all he did was tease more stuff. I mean, think about it. They set up Trigon way back in Justice League versus Teen Titans. I think that was 2016. Had him sealed inside Raven and then brought back in Apocalypse War as a key piece of the final conflict. They didn't forget what they wrote. They went through with it. Now, the DCAMU wasn't perfect, but like, I wouldn't expect it to be. It had its own issues, like the animation sometimes felt stiff and there was lack of detail for characters that were, you know, further away. And it's actually surprising to me because like Young Justice is a show and it still has better animation than some of the DCEU movies. And some characters weren't developed as much and didn't have as much screen time. And even then, the universe had its weaker films. And you know what, I might just make another video about the DCEMU alone, and I'll just talk about the movies and the characters, and I might even do one for the Tomorrowverse. But anyway, if you haven't seen the movies, I definitely recommend it. If you like anime or anything animated, then you should definitely check them out. This might be a hot take. Yeah, I don't think it's a hot take, but I think the DCEMU as a whole is better than the MCU. Of course, I think the peak of the MCU is better than the peak of the DCEMU, but as a whole, the DCEMU still has an edge. So subscribe if you like the video, share, like, do all that, and I'll see you guys in the next one.